Welcome to the Townwide Budget Balancing Subcommittee meeting of Wednesday, March 6th. This meeting is in room 24, Robert M. Thornton Room, Town Hall. With that, let's begin with approval of the minutes of the January 28th meeting. We have a motion?
Motion to approve minutes as submitted.
Second.
Made and seconded. Further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you. Just wanted to mention today, we have a couple of pinch hitters for people who unfortunately couldn't make it. We have Teresa Stewart, who's here for Mara Smith, and we have Bernie Cooper, who's standing in for Tony Mazzicco. So, welcome. And thank you for coming.
I asked the Mr. Chairman to come back from Thailand for the meeting, but he wouldn't do it.
Couldn't get here on time. Maybe he'd do it if he could get here on time.
Yeah. That 90-degree weather is just too much for him, you know. All right. The next item on the agenda is reorganization, which we do, on a yearly basis. And I'd like to ask Tom Maloney, as chairman of the selectmen, to be the person who takes the nominations.
Takes a nomination or makes a nomination?
Takes the nominations.
Okay.
Ex-
So you want me to nominate someone?
No, that's you.
Want you to run the
Basically, you run the election.
Oh, right. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Sorry about that. Very good.
I
Well,
want to reconsider, Mr. Chairman.
I'm
Too late.
sorry, very good. Do we have any, I know that in the
nominate.
past we've had a sort of a rotating system here. So I will entertain nominations we'll start Ann Haley.
I'll nominate Maya Bonhoeffer.
Maev is the current chair of the school committee, and if I'm not mistaken, it's the school committee's turn anyway.
I
Is that
believe it
correct?
is. Yes.
Do we have a second on that? Okay. Do we have any other nominations for chairman? Hearing none, then the nominations are closed. So let's move on the nomination. The sole nomination we have of Maya Bodenhoff to be Budget Balancing Subcommittee chairman for the coming year. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous.
Thank you.
Back to you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Chairman, Ms. Chair, sorry.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Okay. Our first next item of business is the FY20 budget. Mr. McQuaid, you sent out third pass documents. Can you just take us through what's changed since the second pass?
Sure. So, nothing changed on the revenue side. And then, basically, if you went to page 4, that shows in detail what changes were on the general government side on page 4, starting on page 4. And going down through page 6. And they had cost reductions of $144,437. That puts them at $36,391,346. They put the target budget on the right, which happens to be the same number. So general government is balanced. The schools came back with cuts on page 7 totaling $2,456,905. So that puts them at $45,430,000, and they have a target of $44,490,040. So they're still in a deficit by $940,311. You see on page 7, there was a slight reduction of Blue Hills Regional School cost. So general government was already balanced. So I'm going to go back to page 3. This is where we do that 55-45 split. I just kind of noted in red that, the 55 split, I basically added that new savings to the schools as opposed to allocating a 55. Minor thing, but general government was balanced, so they didn't need it. So I gave it to the schools.
Okay, so The only change in the target number was related to this one change of 11,700 in shared costs.
I believe so.
Okay. So that increases the school department's target number by almost $12,000.
Reduces, right?
Yeah.
Well, increases our target,
Right,
which reduces
Okay,
our
yes,
deficit,
yes,
yeah.
yes,
okay.
Yes.
Deficit credits. Oh.
So, we had talked a little bit about what was going on with the school budget, so I just wanted to share some documents. Can you just take the one and pass it? There should be enough for the audience as well. So,
One, yeah.
yeah, it's just a one sheet. This has the same information that is embedded in these spreadsheets, which have the detail by P code and things like that. But this is the tracking sheet that the schools have been using to look at our budget process. And so we started in December with our budget request of 47.9 million, and then the initial target budget at that first pass meeting was 43.8 million. So we had a $4.1 million deficit, and then at our January 16th meeting, the school committee voted to increase our circuit breaker estimate by $1 million. That was, at our December 10th meeting here, we had discussed how we had additional money in the circuit breaker and how we were going to allocate that out over the 5 years. So this didn't change it changed some of the year-to-year things in our 5-year projections, but it didn't change anything over the long term of the 5-year projection. So it didn't have, all those 5-year projections assumed that there was going to be extra circuit breaker money in there.
Does that go out if the override passes and then you have it there for using over the 5 years?
We said if the override passes, we would spend that down by $300,000 a year over
Right.
the 5 years. So we had planned $1.5 million additional in circuit breaker over the 5 years. We didn't feel comfortable that we had that 1.5 definitely sitting there ready to go, because there are still some demands on the circuit breaker numbers for this current fiscal year, but we thought that the reasonable thing was to put in a $1 million. So some of that might get backed out some of that will get backed out if the override passes, but not all of it. We definitely are committed to spending down that circuit breaker by that 1.5 million that we had all agreed to here.
And is it true that you can only keep the circuit breaker money so long?
I believe 1 year.
1 year, yeah.
So it can carry over for 1 year, right?
It has to be
Yep.
used in the next fiscal year that it's received.
Yeah. So
So based on that though, so how can you spread it out over 5 years?
Right.
well, because every year we get in, like last year we got in 2 million, right? So
So they
so
don't
then
tell
you
you.
They
use
wouldn't-
that
they
2
wouldn't
million.
Cycle the money, okay.
Right, right.
In
So then you
addition-
use the 1.5 and then
So in
500,000.
addition to the extra 300,000 you're doing each year, you're already doing $1.8 million or something?
Right, right. We already had $1.8 million
Okay, so it does clear out every year.
into the right,
Right.
right.
Okay.
Yeah. So that brought down our budget request. So we sort of track our budget request on our target budget. And then the second pass budget balancing, with the extra money from the state aid, our target went up, bringing us to roughly a $2.4 million deficit. And then since then, we have eliminated all high school and middle school clubs and activities, eliminated all extracurricular fine arts, eliminated funding for all of these things, eliminated the middle school late bus, all high school athletics, voted to close the Willet, which will reduce our utilities, and will also eliminate 4 FTEs, a net of 4 FTEs, because that would be 2 custodians, a nurse, and a secretary.
Yep.
We would no longer have that elementary principal, but we would then need some sort of lead teacher or some director, I think is what we were
Director,
talking about
yeah.
for the preschool. Then the following meeting, we voted to reduce our elementary teachers by 4 FTEs, reduce our middle school teachers by 3 FTEs, and reduce our high school teachers by 2.2 FTEs. And that brought us to, at the time, a deficit of $952,000. So with this third pass number, helps a little bit, but it just means our deficit is $940,000. So I had gotten a lot of questions. Another thing I'd gotten questions about was, you know, how come the schools are struggling so much more than the town, the general government on this? And I just wanted to, since we look at these numbers, and I'm sure the committee is aware of this, but I just wanted, for people who are trying to follow along, I'm sure the committee is aware that, like, when we look at these numbers, the budget for FY19, this includes what we appropriated at annual town meeting, plus any other items that we were paying cash for, that we weren't borrowing for. So, last year, there were quite a few of those items because we were fortunate enough to have a fair amount of free cash last year. And so we, I think, made the smart decision to pay cash for some things and not borrow for them. So, but by putting because those items get rolled into the budget for day-to-day accounting purposes, they also are there, and it looks like that's really the baseline. But if you go back and look at how much we appropriated at annual town meeting for the schools last year and what we've appropriated this year, the schools are down 1.2%. Like, not only do we not have money to do level services, we aren't level funded. And if you factor in the $350,000 in prepays that we needed last year in order to balance the budget, then we're in fact down 2%. If you look at I was using the second pass numbers of what was available. The third pass number would change things slightly, but $12,000 is going to swing that a significant amount.
Right, well, those things were never in your budget, we put them there. So now, this year, we've chosen not to put them there to show the
Well,
real,
what
to
was-
show that real
what was put in-
structural deficit.
Well, right, that $350,000, right. For the schools, the only thing that was added last year that was not in our budget was a $30,000 for a vehicle. But on the general government side, if you compare the number that we approved last year to the number that is available this year, general government is up 2.5%. So we have found in our projections that the school costs have been increasing more than the general government, but I don't think that fully explains I think the reason that the schools are struggling so much to balance the budget this year is because we are looking at either 1.2% or 2%, depending how you look at the numbers, less than we had last year.
Can I ask you a question about the Willet?
Mm-hmm.
What's the plan for that? If the override passes, it goes back in and forget these cuts? If it doesn't, what are we doing with that building? Is there any money to maintain it in any fashion in the budget, or do we have to put that somewhere?
Yeah, no, that there is money in the budget for repairs and maintenance, but we're planning on mothballing it. It is, turning off the water, turning off the electric, and mothballing it, hopefully short term.
Not
There's
keeping,
still expenses.
not
Yeah,
keeping,
but
not
they-
keeping,
they
not
would-
keeping any basic heat operating or anything?
We'd have to drain. We haven't quite gotten to all that, but yeah, we would have to mothball it. By doing that, we save approximately $290,000.
Is there plans that it might reopen in the future?
Well, yes, because to do that, we have to overcrowd schools and classrooms.
How long can it be closed before you run into problems reopening it? I'm wondering if we need to be doing something with it, not closing it.
That's something we need to
mean,
look
we
at.
need a
I'm
long-range
hoping,
plan
right?
so the town doesn't get caught
the
short
first
on
hope
this.
is we don't close it,
Right.
Because if you walk around our schools, we have classrooms in hallways.
Right.
Okay,
Hopefully the override passes, but if
right.
it doesn't, what are we doing?
Then closing it hopefully would not be more than a year. If it's more than that, then I think we need to look further. Then realistically, if the override doesn't pass, if we don't fix the problem in the second year, we're going to need to look at closing more buildings and really getting to a poor situation. Because if you go back to the projections, you're still looking right now from the original projections of another $650,000 worth of cuts, which is probably a higher number at this point because we originally thought we were going to be at 3.5 million with this budget, and it turned out to be 4.1. So, you know, it is not a good thing. In order to do that, we have to reduce classrooms in each of the schools and increase class size to fit the kindergarten. You know, again, shoehorn, fit the kids into those schools. So it is not the best solution, but cost-wise, if you didn't close it, we would still have to decrease more personnel in order to make up that budget, and you would be looking at much larger class sizes.
Ann?
Looking at this and having gone through this whole process this year, I do think that this group of people need to be active for the next year. And I mean, you know, again, unfortunately during the summer, early fall, before the budget starts. And that we need to take things apart and we need to look at things. We've been doing things the same way for I don't know how many gazillions of years. And so I think that, you know, this past year, we did a study to see where we were with the long-range plan. I spent most of the day on the DOR website. That's not a good thing. But you know, they have all these tools that tell you, you know, where you should be, what you should be doing, and all of this sort of thing. And I think we're close, but we're not there. And I think that when we trip over things, and you didn't really trip, you did a lot of work to do this, but and hopefully it won't be as bad once we get the other new system up and running. I think that we really do need to sit down. We need to look at all of our money, all the grants, everything that comes in, how the grants come in, where the grants get disseminated, and all that sort of thing. And besides the other revenue, and make sure that we have a really good picture of where we are. That, you know, what grants are going away, what grants are staying. You know, Impact Norwood is good for another 5 years or so, right? I think 4 or 5 years.
Not 5.
Not 5.
No, I think they're in their second or third year of 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
Through. So things like that, and I think that this group needs to get down into the weeds and figure out how we're going to move forward in a modern way, shall we say. You know, just and make sure that every member of this group understands where we are with our income, with our revenue, and where we are when things go out the door. Check on that split. See if the split is appropriate. And and don't say that I do not tell you right sitting here that the schools will get more, because that's what I want to see. I want to see really and truly, instead of just throwing a number out of the hat, where we are, what should be our split. So that's my suggestion moving forward.
I'm hoping that Munis will help with that.
I hope so too.
Once that's up and running, I think it would be easier to track the grants and things like that, right?
Yes.
We had scheduled this meeting for this week because we were hoping we might have some numbers on GIC.
Well, I got the numbers today. This is the second or third year this has happened, in which the president of the teachers union comes up to me at my Saturday morning breakfast coffee and says, "Did you see the rates?" And I said, "No." The first year I was really stunned. Last year and again this year it was, "Come on, Jody, are you kidding me?" The GIC votes and rates, all they have to do is add a municipal administrative fee, which is tiny, and get them out. They don't do that. I don't know why they don't do that. They voted a week ago. We got them officially today. The average, if you saw the original releases, is one of those good news, bad news. It's 3.3% average, but roughly half our population, active employees, are in Harvard Pilgrim. And guess what? That's 7.9 to 8.1% increase The Unicare plans, which a lot of employees have started to migrate to, including myself, has gone up either at a 0% or a fraction of a percentage point. So that's good news. So there's a big dichotomy. The retiree Medicare rates have gone up at a very, very low percentage rate. I'm hoping overall that the budget is adequate. I'm not sure if we'll actually pick anything up, because with time, our enrollment group is slowly growing as turnover occurs. I just haven't had a chance to really analyze it in any depth.
Okay.
And I'll be doing that over the next week. And then we're gonna be going into open enrollment during the month of April. And we're gonna make another big push to try to get people to understand the difference between the high-cost plans and the low-cost plans, and to see if people are willing to move. And I'm not sure what more incentive you can have than another 8% rate increase.
Right.
But,
I mean, the one thing with Unicare also is that, you know, you're not limited to a network. You can go to any
Correct.
doctor you want, whereas some of the other plans, you are limited to a specific network with specific doctors, and you may not be able to get the one that you've been using, you know, throughout the years with that specific plan. Whereas with Unicare, you can go to whoever you want.
And if your kids are out of state in schools.
Yeah.
Right.
I,
Place to
Right.
be.
in summary,
Right, that's
I'm
with the
hoping that
CSC,
we're gonna
that's
be
the
able to
most
leave
expensive plan,
the
by the
budget.
way.
We may not pick any money up, but I'm not gonna be, I hope, looking for any more either. It's our best guess.
Yeah, yeah.
So
It
Mr.
seemed like that was the back of the envelope
Mr.
calculation.
Cooper, also, aren't the prescription plans the same for
The
all of
prescription
them?
plans are
Which is,
are
you know,
basically,
a lot of people have
across
concerns
the
like,
board,
oh,
they're the
it's, you know,
same.
would mine cover? But, I mean, that's all the same.
they're all the same, they're being administered by Express Scripts across all dozen or so plans that are being offered.
But the co-payments are different. depending on the
No,
plan.
they're not. There's very little, there's no difference any longer. They basically tried to bring that under control by baselining them all. Co-payments for other procedures may be somewhat different,
Yeah.
but most of them have pretty well settled out at almost very similar fees. We're gonna make an attempt to, during open enrollment, to provide counseling and information sessions to all employees who are willing to come. There were substantial number moved last year. We'll see.
Okay. Any other questions about GIC? Are there any other numbers that we are still waiting on? I mean, I know we're waiting on state aid, the real number.
I was gonna say, that's the big mystery, right? Because I heard recently John Rogers saying maybe the numbers
Yeah, he was in
Not
before the
that-
selectmen with
not that firm.
Senator Mike Rush, and they weren't that optimistic that we could count on the number we're counting on right now, so hopefully they were just being cautious, but
So
they
people
weren't,
may-
oh yeah, I expect that, they were, we
So
can't
pe-
say, we can't say
So people may
that.
recall
yeah.
under the new formula, Norwood made out the way it calculated in several towns. Cities and towns actually went the other way, so they've been complaining to the legislature about the formula, so, you know, ordinarily, we can rely on that number as kind of the floor, and then if anything, it would go up a little, but this year, could go down, so.
Or not go up anymore, that we
Yeah.
might have hoped there'd be a little surprise.
Ann?
I have some questions though on revenue,
Okay.
okay? On the, pass on the revenue, unfortunately, the last time when we got the second pass, it was a very busy evening, we were discussing, the override possibility. And, this got past me. If you look down onto line, 16, which, 17, I don't know, cemetery perpetual interest. In 2019, we had $84,000 there, and we hadn't had it before, and we don't have it this year. Anybody know why?
Yeah, because we took $84,000 out of the cemetery perpetual care interest
Yeah,
and used it to buy trucks for the cemetery.
okay,
So it's dedicated to the cemetery.
okay, great. All right.
Small amount.
Okay, and then the other one, further down on AMR water meter, now I vaguely remembered hearing some discussion about the water meters, but in 2017, we had 300,000, then up to 512,000. 19, we were down to 405, and 2020, I'm concerned because we've jumped it up to 670.
Okay, so I can give you an idea on that. So if you look back to fiscal 17, we were collecting about 360,000 a year.
Okay.
So we didn't drain the fund totally that year. So then the next year we had some extra to put in. That's why we had 512, which we did pretty much drain the whole fund. And then the next year, you know, we were still collecting around 360 and we used the rest of the money. So basically we were there. And then recently the selectmen voted to raise that fee. So
Okay.
the 670 is based on the new fee.
May I?
Absolutely.
Okay, so sure. So this sort of tells you that the water meter money should be going into a fund for water meters, correct? Yeah. And so this is another indication of where we are in our budget and why we need money. This isn't probably, it's probably legal, I hope it's legal, but it probably isn't an appropriate use of our money.
No, we use it to offset the water budget,
It's a tax to the water budget. It's just what it's used for.
but it's still a source of revenue.
Okay. But, so it isn't, you know, it has other uses. It could be used in other ways.
We're
No?
only using it towards the water budget.
We're using it towards the water budget.
Right.
Okay. All right. And, oh, and then I'm sorry to bring this up again, but, the light department, the movement of the money for the light department. Up here in the revenue items, we have the light department on the second pass has an extra $349,500. And then it's down here in the budget for, line number, I think it's 33, yeah. So we have that, and so I didn't get to look, but maybe somebody can tell me, is there a change in the number of employees in the light department?
No,
No,
Don't look at me like I'm crazy.
Don't know
no.
where the question came from, no.
No, because all of a sudden we're moving money around to take care of the chargebacks, am I correct? In the light department. So so it looks like the chargebacks are, the money is the people are being charged to the light department, no?
it's costs in the general government budget that are being charged to the utility.
Some of the manager's time, some of the
Okay,
assistant manager's
yeah.
time, some of the accountant's
Yeah.
time.
Okay.
I think that's what we have done indirectly since the light department started.
Right,
change in
and
accounting almost.
I noticed that in the letter from the audit company, accounting company, that they said that that they had been doing it a different way. So where do we see the difference from one year to the next? Do we see it in the light department? Do we see it in general government? I mean, your payroll has to change somehow.
No, payroll gets exactly the same, so, you know, my salary is still my salary, and the general manager's department is still their salary. We just take a charge at the end of, you know, in total, and say, whatever, 42% of the treasurer belongs to the light department. In other words, if they were an independent enterprise fund, they would have people collecting their receipts.
Okay, all right, thank you. And I think that's it.
But we didn't say, you know, we didn't say 42% of this person is the light department, and, you know, because we want town meeting to understand still what our salary cost is.
Okay. But,
The light
How would you
department's
see the
picking up
salary
more
cost?
costs.
Because now it's gonna be in two separate line items, right?
No, so like right now, it says, take the treasurer's department, it has the treasurer's salary, and then it has the treasurer's staff. So you know exactly how much we're paying people. And then there's a line below that says minus whatever the charge is from the
Oh, it
treasurer.
does? Now?
Yeah, if you look at the detailed budget, which. I
Okay.
didn't-
Oh, we don't have.
well,
You do, but the schools don't have that. The school committee doesn't
Well,
have a detailed
it's
budget.
an
All,
idea.
this is all I have, which just shows that the treasurer's office is down by a certain,
Sorry, I just got the cuts.
I see that the
Yes,
treasurer's office is down by,
Page you are.
what, $185,000? Treasurer's salaries are down $185,000.
Net.
What line number are you on? Oh, okay, I see it.
1051 on page 4.
So would that be where we see it?
All money, light
Yes.
department's picking up costs.
Is that where we're seeing
So
this?
you're raising rates,
Eventually, we probably will have to.
right? I mean, it seems like we're projecting that the revenue is now going to be 0.5% higher than it was before we made this change.
There won't be any new income, because any increase in the rate will just be offsetting that cost.
No, but the schools buy almost $1 million worth of electricity every year.
So,
So,
that's the
Won't,
point.
won't affect the, I mean, it won't affect the unit rate.
so we had an estimate that our light department revenue was going to be 62 million, and then we changed that by $350,000, and that doesn't change. We're projecting more revenue coming in, but we're going to do that without adjusting any rates.
We'll adjust the rates if we have to, we may not have to. There may be other income coming in that we don't have to do that. If all things are equal and there's no additional way of doing it, then you need to increase the rates to cover it, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the
But
school
there's,
department
but it's
is a
not,
customer.
but it's not automatic that we'll have to do that.
No, I understand the rate
The
conversation
light
is a
department
separate
has
thing.
always included they've always imputed some general government costs into the rate structure. But it's been a long time since they've
It's
done a
just
direct
accounting,
analysis,
bookkeeping.
and that we've never actually transferred money. Part of this had nothing to do with the entire budget process. It had more to do with the financial statements when we went to borrow money for the new light department headquarters. The rating agencies they're used to enterprise funds, and we don't have an enterprise fund for the electric light department in the traditional sense that most other municipalities that operate light departments have a completely segregated fund. So they're asking us to move towards that model. So this is the first
Trying to do it
year.
over like 5
Yeah.
years, 5 or 6 years,
But
instead of all at
the-
once.
And as we do that, we may update some of those chargebacks, because they may have they may have changed over time. But those costs have basically always been part of the rate. So we're not necessarily gonna be raising the rates by $350,000.
But in prior years, though that responsibility for that roughly $350,000 worth of services had been in the general government part of the pie, and now you're pushing it up to shared services.
And the revenue will come back and it gets shared, remember, between the two bodies, so.
Well, except for now, the expenses are also pushed up above shared services, so it
Right.
kind of goes in and out before there's any
I don't
sharing.
think it's gonna be a dramatic impact on the school department at all. You won't even notice it, especially if there's a new facilities department.
I don't see how the new facilities department would play into this, but, do you have any other questions about this, the
No.
light department?
So the question though is that as a big customer of the light department, is the school department budget gonna have to absorb an increase in rates because of the way we're doing the way we've changed the accounting?
The answer is basically no.
Okay.
And only if we have to go up with the rates, we may not have, just because we're moving the money over, doesn't automatically mean we have to increase.
No,
the
not
rates.
because you're moving the money over, but because I was assuming that because you
Right now
increased
you-
the
right now
estimate
you-
for the
right-
revenue.
Right now, you get that indirectly in the money the town, the revenue side. So it's gonna, either we have to come up with the money elsewhere in our budget or rates to then put that back. But it won't affect anything, it'll still be there. It's just bookkeeping. It's just bookkeeping.
Except for your, it,
We're moving to the bookkeeping, like they said, that the
no,
bonding agency and
I have no problem
the
with that.
accountants want, yeah.
I have no problem with the idea that these salaries should be part of the light department and should be part of the shared expenses. I just wonder how that impacts, as we take something that had been the responsibility of the general government and it's no longer part of that, you know, that, the part below the split, that seems to me that it makes it much easier for the general government to balance their budget this year.
It helps.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course it helps.
Right. And so I look at, we have made these drastic cuts.
That's why Tony took your salary for your maintenance people and everything, for your maintenance
That's one
staff,
of the
and then took it
reasons,
over.
yeah.
That's why we put that over
He's
to
offered
general
that,
government.
but
Oh,
that's
it's carried,
not,
that's in
It's in our
these
budget.
numbers.
I understand it's in his budget, but it's not in ours. That change is not in our budget because the school committee has not voted to make that change. And we I personally think in general it's a very good idea and I want to move in that direction. But as we dug into this, if we were to say like, okay, yes, we're definitely doing a shared facilities department, then a couple of years down the road, we would be moving $4.6 million out of our budget. So it's a pretty big decision. And I'm not saying we shouldn't
And all
do
the
it.
responsibility, and it's the same thing, you're spending it now.
I would appreciate if you let me finish what I was saying.
Okay.
So there's a few things that are still outstanding on this. There's questions about the revolving funds. Right now, would we have rental income that we use to offset utilities and custodial overtime, and we have control over those rental rates and who's going to rent in our facilities, and we haven't talked about how that would work. We have started to talk about an MOU, but we haven't agreed on an MOU for the facilities department. We have 3 different unions on the school side alone that would be potentially impacted by this, and we haven't had conversations with any of them. And so I've talked to David Hajar about this, I've talked to Alan about this, that although I think that this is something we want to do, we want to continue pursuing, this is a big decision. There's a lot of moving pieces, there's a lot of things that have to be done well. We can't get that finalized and fully vetted between now and March 13th when we have to finish our budget. And so,
But nevertheless, I mean, the manager decided to absorb the, if you will, the administrative overhead of that central office. There's a tremendous amount of work to be done, all of those issues that you mentioned. But he said, we'll absorb that in our budget. We have to go forward. Most communities of our size are doing a facilities department. They've all made it
Absolutely.
work. And I don't
Why
see
it
any
wouldn't
reason
work
why the
at all,
town
yeah.
of Norwood can't make it work. We don't have a lot of details. I know that the intent was to begin to try to implement it January 1st. The manager's budget basically assumes those salaries for the full fiscal year. We understand the school committee, under any scenario, has jurisdiction over the rental of their buildings. They can't give that responsibility up any more than the library trustees or the selectmen can give up jurisdiction over the rental of their buildings. And state law may very well have something to say about receipts in that particular item. But that's not a reason to go forward. And
none of these are deal breakers.
Right.
It's just
But
also
I'm
that
saying
the
in
schools
terms of
aren't
the
ready to
budget-
sign and say,
No.
yes, we know, we're going forward
Well,
with this.
we'll put the money back in our budget and you can make
I
the
mean,
cuts.
it's like,
Yeah,
the
we're,
town-
Couple of teachers, but if you don't want those teachers, fine.
the town assumed the cost of maintaining most of the ball fields, including those on school properties. That hasn't been an issue. They're still under the control of the school department. We maintain them.
the Coakley fields are not under the control of the school department.
Those are
If-
the only fields in the high school field. But we're paying the cost of all of the other school fields. And at one point, the school
But that's why I
department-
asked the question, is
The
that,
schools were supposed to be contributing towards that, a small percentage based upon usage. That has never happened, and that's okay, we've absorbed that cost, it's working well. And I'm saying we've taken the administrative cost of the central office staff, we've put it into the general government budget. That doesn't mean that July 1st, all of a sudden, they wave to the school committee and say, bye, we're moving to the town hall and he's our new boss. That's not the way it's intended to happen. We're looking forward to it. We know we can make it work. We're trying to provide some budget relief. And that's all.
If we want to make this happen by January 1, we don't have to
And it may not
commit
happen, but
on March 13th is my point.
well, the point is, you said it's in your budget. If I were the school committee, I'd
Take
vote
it out.
to take up the town general government's offer and say, okay, there's 200, whatever the number is, take that out.
And that will be something that the school committee will consider, but I believe that we don't want to make any commitment like that until we really understand the full implications of that, and I don't think we can do that in the next week.
Okay.
Alan?
Make the
Well,
changes.
I'm certainly disappointed that, we don't have a finalization of a facilities department. And a lot of people have worked really hard to do this, and we've gotten closer at this point than we've ever had in the past. And, if you don't feel comfortable by March 13th, there's nothing I can do about it. However, I would urge everyone, and I mean everyone at the table, to really sharpen the pencils and get this resolved by town meeting, because that's when we have to have the final budget numbers. And I think this is an opportunity that we can't miss. And again, I urge everybody to, get down to the nitty-gritty and, get this thing done, because with everything else that's going on, the override and everything else, this is the perfect opportunity to do this, and we can't waste this, this chance.
So I'm sure you'll bring it back to your
Mm-hmm,
committee,
absolutely.
and you do have until March 13th to get it straightened out, and we'll leave things as they are right now in the budget, and you guys can discuss it, and if you choose to do otherwise, then
Again,
we'll make the changes before March 13th.
again, the number it's actually slightly over $300,000. So it shouldn't be in both
It was-
places.
160,000.
The number here,
That's I think, for, I think a couple of additional personnel was
So that wouldn't
280,000.
affect it.
that would
Yeah,
affect
it
No.
would just,
That's true.
it would just be two
Okay.
people that
You're correct.
would affect their budget.
So what is the number? 228, I'm sorry.
280, well, 280 in the
savings-
town
if the
budget,
school
160 in their budget, I think.
Yeah, if the
Plus
school
or minus.
committee, in other words, they're carrying two individuals in their budget, so they would save that $160,000 if they agreed to the plan. And then, if we don't go forward, then the town has 280, I think it is, 282.
Where is it on here, by the way? I'm sorry.
It is on, page 4. 1200 is the account number.
Okay, there it is.
$282,000.
So we have so we have 280,000 in salaries for this department. That consists of how many people? Four people. And how many of them would come over under this department on July 1?
Two.
Two. So on January 1st, you pick up two more. Is that the idea?
I'm not sure of the timing, but I know Tony told me there was 4 people in there.
Financially, it's two of their people,
Yep.
and then two additional.
Right.
Yeah.
No,
And 165,000 is worth approximately 3 teachers.
didn't want it, we'll take it.
Yes, Teresa.
Just to clarify, so, with the third pass budget, the schools are at the 940,000 deficit.
Mm-hmm.
So and that includes on our side, the documents that we have for the schools, the 160,000 that is being discussed right now, correct?
Right.
Okay, so from my perspective, with everything that's been happening at school committee meetings, if no additional money is talked about or discussed or anything tonight, a week from tonight, as a school committee, we need to finalize 2 budgets. we need to finalize the non-override budget, which we're looking at a reduction of 940,000,
Mhm.
and then the budget if there is an override.
Mhm.
I'm correct so far, right?
Yes.
Okay. So just wanted to make sure I have the numbers correct. I'm not sure if you've been watching the school committee meetings, but some of the comments I'm hearing right now are really insulting, and I need to defend everybody who's involved in the school committee because we have been agonizing over the reductions that you see in front of you. And we have stated time and time again that we don't want to lay off a single teacher. And our students, this town's students and youth, deserve so much more than what this document I have prepared reflects. So to hear comments that are kind of under people's breaths now be saying, if you don't want the 160,000, we'll take it, and lay off your teachers is just really offensive to all the work. I understand that, and we appreciate that we need to come together and collaborate, and that's what we're truly trying to do. And I can't speak on behalf of everybody in the school committee, but I have been listening to what my colleagues have been saying, and I feel really confident, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you perceive it, that a week from tonight, there's at least 3 of us who are going to say, we're just not ready to do this. And that is no disrespect to the work of Tony or David Hajar or all of you who have served on various committees. It is absolutely no disrespect. It is out of a place of wanting to do things correctly. And I hear you, Mr. Slater, that we don't want to lose this opportunity, and I agree. I think long term it's an amazing opportunity. But I have been in so many meetings on subcommittees and task force and strategic planning where we have a lot going on the school side that I don't even think the public is fully aware of everything the schools are trying desperately to achieve that we have tabled, because although we believe in it long term, short term it hasn't fallen into place. So I would just ask you respectfully to consider the facilities management in the same vein. Nobody's saying no. We're saying let's plan long term. 2 of my colleagues at the last meeting very clearly asked, if we do this now, what does that mean as a whole for the town? And I believe there's 2 more additional positions we're talking about adding, correct?
There's 2, that's 2 plus 2, and then eventually probably a 5th in time.
Right. So I don't, and I believe some of my colleagues don't feel comfortable saying yes to this, when that might mean that on the general government side, there's 2 more positions added. If we still have the 940,000 minus the 160 to reduce.
After we've already eliminated 12 FTEs.
After we talked about closing a school and the 12 FTEs, after we were talking about overcrowding our classrooms, I pull up the data if you want. It's in my bag over here about how overcrowded our classrooms are going to be. This town invested in the AI3 report, the facilities report, which I know many of you are very familiar with, more familiar than I am, but I spent some time digging through that data. I mean, go back and look at that and what it tells you about how overcrowded our schools already are. And now by closing the Willet, if there is no override, they're even more overcrowded. So I just have to respectfully ask, if you're wanting us to do this, I don't know any other way of framing it. What are you proposing to help the schools? How are we as a town okay with all of these reductions in front of you? And then to say comments that some
Not
of you
that's
are
why we're
saying.
supporting an override.
Absolutely, I'm supporting an override too. But all these things in front of us, I'm at a loss for
I
words.
think we can do it. I think we can do it. I really do. There is a will to move that forward, and I think it will go forward. I think that the selectmen in how they and everybody involved in this process, that yes, we will have to hire a couple of people, but I think that in the long term, attrition will help us, and that sort of thing. So don't get too hung up on that, all right? I really do think that is something that we will sincerely look at in order to be able to fill these positions. So I think I have the feeling that we can go forward and that we can keep talking and working on it. but just knowing that we have to have conferences with your unions and extra people, I think that right now, I understand you're trying to balance your budget, so you want a month off. Yeah, okay. I think that we can delay moving forward on this for probably a month, and we'll be all set, right? And there's always special town meetings in the
I
fall.
mean, I just want to point out again, in the same vein, the people involved still, they work for the school department, their contract is with you folks. And the people that work in that department, their contract is with you folks. That can't change just because we said, well, we're going to absorb some of those costs in general government. There's a lot of work to be done, we understand that. It may not happen January 1st, many of those issues may still not be worked out, it's complicated. But we're offering to pick those costs up, we want to get started. There really aren't a lot of there aren't any strings attached.
Well,
I
that
mean,
would be
is
good
the
to hear. I mean, that
contract-
wasn't
the
my sense of
contract-
it.
Well, but we want to go forward with the facilities department. It deserves the attention of the town as a separate department. Our facilities, we have a massive plant of several $100 million.
We do.
And it deserves to have a seat at the table when it comes to town meeting. Because building maintenance frequently is one of the easier areas to cut. It's, our buildings are clean, but long-term maintenance is a difficult issue that's gotta be addressed. We think that a building department can provide us with some substantial savings in terms of utilities, and in other areas as well. But we realize that the implementation process is going to take time. Just because the money is moved, it doesn't mean that all of a sudden they work for us. Their contract is with you. That hasn't changed. We can't change that. We can't change that without you.
Okay.
There's gotta be an agreement between the parties that we wanna make it work and here's how it's gonna work. How will the costs, are they gonna become shared costs? How are they gonna be divided up? Is it gonna be in square feet? We don't know that yet.
Right.
But
Right.
we wanna work towards that and we wanna try to make it work because we all think that a facilities department really in the long term is in the best interest of all of us.
Okay. Anne Marie?
That's,
Yeah, I just wanted to ask if there are policies and procedures already written up in draft form for starting this new entity, as would be standard procedure in any new business venture.
that's still being done.
But do you think if you went to the SBA and asked for a loan without having that business plan, you would get the money? I'm kind of seeing that we're
I'm-
entering into something prior to having
I don't see,
everything vetted.
I'm sorry, that's not an obstacle with the SBA. Come on, that's,
What's that have to do with
I
that?
don't think that has anything to do with
It's a funding source.
Yeah, not for this problem.
Well, except for the fact that we're entering into a feasibility study or an eligibility period with the MSBA on May 1st.
But facility departments are old hat for them.
They're everywhere in the
There's
state.
dozens of them.
But facility departments that are fully documented is, I believe, what Anne Marie is saying. Not that
That's-
it's,
do we have it today? No, we don't, because we don't have an agreement with the school committee in writing yet. Those are the things that have to be worked on.
exactly, which is what I was saying, is
Well,
that we're not gonna finish
But,
that in
I
a
mean,
week. And
No,
so
But
we,
we're saying that there's basically a no strings attached. We've picked up some money in the general government budget. It's not in the shared budget, right, it's in the general government budget. So, I think we've said enough, so.
Alan?
Yeah, no, well, just to end it, I'll just reiterate what I said. We have 2 months to do this. I have no problem as chairman of the FinCom getting up before town meeting and say, by the way, there's a change in your budget books from what we thought we had. Meaning we'll have a new facilities department. So if we don't have it on the 13th of March, so be it. But we have 2 months to finish this. I think we can. The issues aren't insurmountable, and we will be missing out on a great opportunity if we don't do this.
all right. And another thing I wanted to talk about is one thing that we are struggling with in our budget is, as we were working on our level services budget, we were asked by this committee to put in a reasonable number for snow and ice. So our number right now is $230,000 higher than it was last year. And I think that and I absolutely believe that ultimately, long-term, that should be in our budget, but without an override, I don't see how we can manage that increase.
Aren't we working to put them all in one budget? Schools, general government, airport, everything.
Eventually,
So it's not in this year's.
not in this year's.
No, this year's budget has an extra $230,000 for snow and ice on the school side.
And I think, Madam Chair, we budgeted 14,000 roughly for the current fiscal year. Upcoming fiscal year, you've increased that to 240 or something. So you're asking if perhaps we should back down that number to something lower, something somewhere between 14 and
And
245.
245. Yeah.
And that would help that $940,000.
That would significantly help that 940,000.
Well,
I
that's,
mean, this is really a vote of the school committee,
Right.
but because we did it at the recommendation of the budget balancing committee, I just wanted to kind of have that conversation here before we vote at the school committee.
One
Okay,
thing,
explain those numbers again.
the appropriation for the current year is 14,000 and change.
14,000 snow and
But
ice.
the
That's
realistic
schools.
number
Yeah.
is something like 240. Actually, year-to-date, I think they've spent about 154,000.
Yes.
So, and this is probably a slightly below average year so far in snow and ice, I think. And they, you've got 3 to 4 weeks to go anyway, where you might get hit again. So the question is, so they've appropriated 245 at the request of this body, which is sort of more realistic in
It
historic.
is. If you look at page 6, it's like the fifth line up from the bottom, 6121. Our last year actuals was 246.
Yeah. So the question is, can we,
I'm sorry, our last year actuals was 245.
yeah,
What do we do with that? It's two, we had 250,000.
we added 75.
75.
Yeah, but he's maybe we
We're
back it
still under
down.
where we would like to be, but because we think we're probably
I
gonna.
mean, I think that's a fair request.
Mhm.
I think it's
So-
a fair request.
And with the idea, of course, we understand that we'll get to next spring, so 13 months hence, and we'll say we need free cash to
Well,
bail out snow and
right.
ice around the town,
Well,
and
what-
mostly
So
on the
what
school side. But at least if it goes up from 14, we're getting back onto getting on the right path.
Right, so what I was proposing to recommend to the school committee is that we reduce that number by $200,000, which would still make us almost 3 times what we had last year, but would be,
Would get you through a little ice storm at Halloween if that happens.
So you wanna reduce that 200?
yeah.
200,000.
So
Yeah.
down to
Down to
45,000.
45.
Assuming that the override does not pass. If the override does
Right.
pass, we go back up to the number
Right.
that's in here.
Okay.
I mean, from my perspective, I have no problem with you doing that. I mean, it's really your call, not our
Yes.
call is budget balancing. But if that's where you'd like to make savings, then that's certainly
I'll make
your
that
decision to
motion
make.
if you need a motion.
I don't know that we need an motion. I was really kind of, because it is our
Right.
vote, but I was looking for some kind of
Well,
consensus
If you-
before
well, If
we.
you wanna go back to your board with the consensus from this one, you take a vote.
Okay, great. You want to make a motion?
I did. I just-
All right, I'll second.
Thank
Taking
you.
nominations again.
Any discussion? Discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, unanimous. Thank you.
All right.
So now the question, that still leaves us with $740,000, and we're still, in the position where our appropriation, if this goes forward, our appropriation would be about $600,000 less than we were appropriated last year, and so I'm asking if there's any way that we can find some relief for the schools.
I have one question. I'm one of those ones who's a hawk on the free cash in business, but as it stands now, Mr. McQuaid, we have $1.694 million in free cash. We haven't spent anything, right?
Correct.
Okay. And then Mr. Slater, I think you and I talked a little bit about what the FinCom is planning to propose vis-à-vis Forbes Mansion.
Correct.
Okay, would it be okay if we talked about that a little bit so we can get a handle on free cash?
Well, yeah, I mean, after the Forbes project was voted at town meeting, I think in May of 18, as I recall, there was a question about absorbing costs in the budget for Forbes Hill for the first 2 years, even though you know, there were gonna be bands, there were still costs associated with the mansion, the interest in the bands as well as the operation and maintenance. So the FinCom took a vote shortly after that, saying that for fiscal 19 and fiscal 20, which was the time that the town was gonna determine what it wanted to do with the property, whether it wanted to keep it, whether it wanted to sell it, whether it wanted to, you know, do something in between, that the FinCom would try to find, via free cash, enough money to cover the costs of Forbes Hill during that period. That would include both, you know, the bonding cost, the band cost, as well as the operation and maintenance costs of the facility. And last year, we appropriated around $500,000 worth of free cash. So as far as I'm concerned, you know, that still stands for FY '20. So,
Excuse me, that's in the budget, isn't it, Tom? It's not in his free cash, it's in the budget.
It's
I thought
in-
it was taken out of the
no,
budget.
no, it's in the, well,
There's 75,000, I believe, in maintenance.
right, and
And
400 something
I
in
believe the number is 434,290 in interest.
the band interest. That's right now
So
in
the
the
total of-
shared cost budget.
Of the interest plus the maintenance would be 509,290.
Yeah.
So,
So,
I'm sorry, can you hear that again? I'm sorry.
500, so the interest on the bands related to the, you can call it the mansion, but Forbes property, 434,219. The maintenance of the Forbes property is 75,000.
so what I would propose is that the 75 for maintenance goes back into the town budget, the 430 something, which will be taken out of the shared cost budget, would go over to the school budget.
Hold on a second. And we're making that assumption that it is selling and therefore we don't need this money.
Well, you might still need money. You're gonna still have to pay that off. The
No, but
treasurer
we're
still has
doing-
to pay that.
But we're doing it out of free cash.
Free cash budget's the same money.
Okay, all right, so the plan was to take, let's just.
No, because what this does is, instead of using whatever other source of funds we're going to use for that, we're gonna put free cash in, which frees that money up to be used for another purpose. And that's what we're saying.
So it's in
It's-
here, it's
it-
in the budget now?
It's
And-
it's in the budget now. Let's assume
Okay.
it's tax money.
All
So if
right.
it's tax money, you know, you're
So
essentially
what
what
you're
you're saying, you
basically
just make
saying
a
is
switch.
take-
You
Take a
switch it
certain-
out.
Take 400,000, whatever the number is,
Right.
of free cash.
Yeah.
And let that go to schools.
Right, 75 to
But we should-
to cover the costs of the mothballing of the
take our-
mansion.
Our millions, we should take our, in my opinion, we should take our 1,600,000, take no less than, leave no less than 500,000. So you
Right.
got 1,100,000.
Yeah,
Take snow and ice or anything else we know, and then if there's still 400,000 or 500,000, let that go to schools. But I think we should keep 500,000 as a minimum,
right.
and
That's consistent with financial policies,
right,
correct.
and the bonding agency already know that we have wonderful policies, but we don't follow them, so we
Right.
should start following them. So we keep 500,000, we pay snow and ice, and if there's anything else, definitely has to get paid out of that, and the balance could go to schools.
Well-
I
Do
just
we
don't
have
know,
a- do
just
we
don't
have-
know now what that number is.
So
Well-
we just shared an estimate for the schools that we think we're currently $140,000 over budget on snow and ice. Is there an estimate of where general government is at with that?
I don't know where we are, but you know, but there was a proposal to to fund certain equipment, out of free cash, so I don't know if we really wanna, at this point, go to,
That's not what I was saying, we need to know what all those
Oh,
numbers are.
okay,
that
right.
was-
I think he's
That's
got-
already coming out
right.
of
I
free
think,
cash.
I think on snow and ice, Bernie, I think it tells us at this point, we haven't spent everything yet.
Yeah,
Right,
Okay.
we're close.
right,
So-
but even,
We're really
but,
close.
but there's other things that we have to agree or not agree on, but at the moment, there's other things penciled in to come out of free cash. So
Correct.
we need to know what that number
It's
is,
about
to know
four-
if there's the 400,000 you're now suggesting available or not. Or maybe there's more, but we need to know those numbers.
I think the capital request, at least at the moment, is 466.
466?
But I think, Mr. McQuaid, we talked a little bit about some, a couple of closed-out projects that might yield something to tune of 139,000. Should I keep my mouth shut or just?
39.
Well, I just
No,
haven't
'cause
touched
that
the
was on my
treasury
list
yet
anyway.
to see how much, see what you can do with that money. So in other words, we have some projects we borrowed for that are now completed. So there's a few small, little
Right.
over from Prescott floors and stuff, and there's, and, but I haven't had a chance to touch
So
the treasury.
350, so 350,
The point is that, just so I can finish, the point is, this happened about 4 years ago, I remember too, where we actually, there was some money from projects that have been closed out. And I think you have to reassign them to other capital things.
if they were borrowed for.
Yeah,
But can't town meeting, by itself take that money and reassign it to another purpose, such as, another piece of equipment, another borrowing type of project?
Right, well,
Right.
see, the benefit there is that instead of taking 460 out of free cash, in the upcoming
take it
year,
out.
you might take 330.
Right.
Because you repurposed this other money.
Yeah, I mean, we're not gonna know that, the numbers until the snow and ice, season is over. We still have another month. I mean, I feel reasonably confident that we can take that amount of money out of free cash and still be able to find funds either by using remaining free cash for those other purposes or potentially, borrowing for some of those if we have to, or even putting certain pieces of equipment off for a year if we really have to. I mean, we're at the point now where I think we have to make some decisions, and I'd rather not wait, another month or two to decide, where we are with free cash. I'd just as soon, put that 75 and 433 out today and move on.
So question, the 434 now goes where, into debt service?
434 presently is in debt service. It's banned interest.
Okay.
and actually the cost will still stay there.
Yeah.
So I think when we make the motion to pay debt service, we would, ordinarily we say from taxation is what the motion is, but we would take $434,290 for free cash to pay for that, and $75,000 to pay for the mansion on a motion on that one. And even though Alan suggested that giving the $434,290 to the schools, it seems to me that the general government budget is balanced, so why not give them the $75,000 on top of that too? So in other words, if we're gonna make two motions that basically applies free cash to a couple of budget items, they total $509,000. I don't think the general government, we're balanced, so I don't think.
I think Tony was looking at that 75 potentially as a cost necessary if you have to mothball the
But we're already paying, that's already in the budget.
mothball the Willet.
Oh, okay, that's another matter.
Yeah, I
But
think that, I
We
think,
actually, I think we, well, was it-
But
we had that in our,
Mr. Mizuko's in
Mr.
in
Riccardi
Thailand.
did do
He's
some
in
analysis.
Thailand and we're
Right.
here, so it seems to me,
Don't ever leave the room.
I'm just saying,
well, I mean, are you saying that you have sufficient money in your budget to do what's necessary to mothball the Willet if that's what it comes down to?
we have the people to do that. It's turning off the switches and draining the pipes.
I mean, Mr. Riccardi did
There
come
is
up with a plan for
Right.
how to do this, and that $292,000 savings that we have for closing the Willet is actually the net savings. There's
Okay.
more savings in there than that, right? Because we're losing 4 FTEs and we're losing some of the utilities
Right,
and things
that's
like that.
the-
But
right.
then we had to factor in the fact that in order to do that, we would then have to move things. We have to move the portable classroom from the Willet to the Prescott, so there's money in the budget for that, and we have to actually pay movers to move stuff, and so that's taken into the into.
All right, well, all I'm saying is that if you follow Mr. McQuaid's suggestion, as FinCom chairman, I don't want to hear, a few months down the road that, we need more money, to mothball the Willet, because you're telling me now that you have the ability to do that.
But we
That's
wouldn't-
my
we
point.
wouldn't- We wouldn't plan on closing the building if we hadn't looked at that.
Okay?
Okay.
All right.
well,
Okay.
so if you did that 509,290 and the 200,000 that Maya proposed, that's 709,290 of the cuts. And then
290 plus what?
200,000 for snow and ice
Snow and ice.
reduction. So that would give the schools cuts of 709,290, right? Well, not cuts, but closing the gap, because a lot of it's free cash.
So
You
if
still
if
get
we
the
can,
160 for the facility,
If
if
we-
we
Well,
subtracted
if
it.
you added, if they later decided to take advantage of the, you know, reduction in staff related to facilities, that would be another 160. Then you'd be up to 869, which is within $100,000 of the total. But
Right.
I know that's a leap to talk
How
about the
much you
ones.
But
leave-
if we do
I'm
put
losing
it-
your numbers, excuse
if-
me, how much you leave in free cash?
About
Well, we
one
would-
point, about 1.2.
1.7 plus 5.
1.2, and you have some capital requests, and you have snow and ice.
Oh, I don't think you're leaving enough in.
Well, then you leave 300 instead of 5 after town meeting. You
Well,
only got
and-
30 days to go.
and with the capital requests, I mean, I'm on the capital outlay committee and I'm in favor of spending free cash when we have it on capital requests. But as a member of the school committee, I have to say that, do I think that what's best for the students of Norwood is to set that money aside for capital things so we don't have to borrow this year?
No, I think Mr. Maloney's idea is a good one, that, I forget the number on that schedule I gave you, Tom, but
139, I think.
yeah, so it's 140,000 of completed projects, so if town meeting reauthorizes those for other projects, of these new projects that we're looking at, you know, the ones that we were gonna use free
We
cash.
could use those for,
in
that instead
effect,
of free cash.
You know, that
Okay.
frees up that free cash, so.
And you're right, I mean, there might be certain things, even rolling stock, you borrow for it over 5 years, say, the interest on it is not that much.
We
I
should
mean, you'd
be-
rather not,
we
but,
got-
you know.
Of course
We got
you'd rather
plenty of-
not.
You know,
we
but
have
if it's
plenty of
just not
borrowing
that much.
capacity, we should be borrowing more.
Yeah. So with that,
No, we
that's
should-
that's an option
Plus
too.
this
Yeah, I
money
mean,
is-
philosophically,
No,
I
it's
don't,
what they
I don't like to borrow, you know, if we have to borrow a couple $100,000 for 5 years, I mean,
Yeah.
I'll deal with it.
Right, right.
So let me make a motion for $509,290 out of free cash that goes to the school department.
Okay, but so really what we wanna do is make the
Oh.
town meeting, when we do the budget at the town
Yeah.
meeting, the debt budget would be offset by 434,290 as a source.
Right,
And the mansion as a source would be 75. But we know that changes the bottom line of the town, so it allows the schools to use that money to reduce their.
So we're
Not-
borrowing
not-
less or borrowing more here? We're borrowing less.
no, we're borrowing this, it's the same amount.
No, we're just talking about the 509,000.
Right.
Okay,
Just
so
taking that out of
Alan has
free
made a
cash and
motion. Do
letting
we have a
them have-
second on that?
I think I'm seconding that.
Okay, great.
And
Thank you.
If we get this straightened out.
And so I just want to clarify that this money would be to be added to the FY20 budget. Because
Correct.
sometimes we've done things like prepays and.
No, this
Correct.
isn't-
No,
this
no,
isn't
this is-
prepaid, no.
Correct.
You can't prepay until you get your budget straight.
And the reason why,
Right.
and the reason why this is a little different than, as we talked about, not putting any free cash into the budget, we're not technically, you know, this is just a one-time, you know, to get through Forbes Hill, because at the end of this fiscal year, we'll know pretty much what's gonna happen one way or the other with Forbes
So
Hill,
in
and
your
we'll just have
recap
to move
sheet,
accordingly.
in your recap sheet, this shows up as a special purpose, not reduction of levy limit. Tax.
Right,
Yeah.
and basically, I think your motion is to add that $509,290 to the school committee target budget,
Correct.
right? So
Target budget, correct.
Okay, so we have a motion made and seconded, and I think we're now clear on the details. Any further discussion? All in oh, did you have further discussion?
Is it free cash that we're moving, or?
Yes,
the
Yeah,
other?
it's
Okay,
free
okay,
cash.
Free cash.
It's
Just
free
wanted to
cash.
check.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Okay.
All right.
Thank you. That brings the schools closer to being level funded, and makes it does make it somewhat easier to balance our budget. Yeah. Any further discussion on the FY20 budget? 09, yes. Okay, then, do we want to discuss MOU?
I think we need to.
Okay, Ann, did you want to start that?
All right. We received via email an MOU that Bill had started written, and I threw some ideas of my own in there. And I think that we just need to start a discussion and get this MOU moved forward. Along with, I have to say, you're not gonna hear it again from me, policies, because the MOU actually needs to follow along the policies that we should be following. So, I'd love to hear comments on what I wrote. Maybe I don't, but. I did write myself a couple of notes after I sent this out to everybody, if I can find my notes. That there were a couple of changes that I wanted to make in what I wrote. Hold on a minute. I think that I neglected to put in here that we would be having a, first of all, what I gave you, what was given out to you tonight was a copy of what is in Arlington's budget books.
Right.
And a message from the, I think it's from.
Town manager,
Huh?
town manager.
So in here he reiterates is what has happened before, how they set it up, how they wanted to make sure that it lasted them a long time. And so that's their update on that. But one thing I did miss in my version was that I think we needed to say that we were developing an override stabilization fund, and I don't believe I put it in there, so it needs to go in there someplace.
I believe that that's very important to have.
Yes,
To call
it was
that
a
out.
very important piece. And, any comments?
I really liked the fact that it just kind of calls out that there's a promise to the citizens of Norwood and makes it clear, and that it's in very comfortable language. It doesn't feel like a
It's not written by a lawyer.
yeah. The one concern I did have is that it doesn't make clear what the baseline would be for our operating budgets, and for the FTEs, we have proposed that there would be, not only would we be brought up to our level of services request, but also $1.5 million over that for some restorations in the school department, and that would involve adding some FTEs beyond what we have now. So I just want to make clear that we.
So how would you put that?
I don't know exactly.
I think the original way we put it was starting in for planning for FY '21.
Yeah.
Right.
So if the override passes, you have that.
Okay,
That
so it
piece, and
said
then-
beginning in FY '21, no additional positions outside mandated? Is that what you're talking about right there? That paragraph? Is that how
Yeah,
it was?
yeah, basically, yeah,
So we could add that paragraph in
yeah.
somewhere?
And then.
Or not necessarily the whole paragraph, but at least that baseline to say
Right.
Okay.
And then the one piece I had a question with, because, we all know since every form in '93, that school committee has, budget authority. And number 4 gets into federally state mandated programs. And then there's a phrase at the end of the first, with a positive vote from the budget balancing committee. I'm not quite sure.
Okay, so where are you?
I'm on number 4,
Four.
end of the first sentence.
I mean, the budget balancing committee in and on itself doesn't have any authority at all. I mean,
Right.
I mean, I could argue if you wanted to put anybody there, it would be the finance commission, but I'm not sure whether either one of us have to be there.
Right, and and again, we've talked about, you have kids move in, you have to provide a service. So I mean, that's not.
What I was trying to do was
Yeah.
to make sure that it went through not only you folks, but that the FinCom and the rest of the people involved understood that there was going to be spending involved and an impact to the budget. And maybe that wasn't quite the way to put it, but that's what I was looking for.
Isn't it still gonna go through the regular budget process? We're committing that we're not gonna add any unless it's required.
Okay.
And if it's required,
wanna
they're gonna
take it
put
off,
it in their
fine.
budget, and everyone's gonna question it through the budget process in town meeting. And if
Okay.
it's wrong, we're gonna take it out. If it's right, it's gonna stay in.
Okay.
So I don't know
So
why it
we
has
can
to say
take out
anything,
that
it has to
phrase?
say anything
Right.
about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think Ann has some good suggestions here. What I would recommend is, well, Tony's not here today, but Tony and Dave have taken the lead in drafting out an agreement. You know, they take a look at what you have, they take a look what they've already drafted out, come up with the new proposal, and then we see where we stand.
Yeah.
Well, or another would be maybe to have Tony and I sit with someone from the finance committee, school committee, and the selectmen and sit down and hammer it out, because the problem is that we go around, we come up with a draft, and one group is not happy with it.
Right.
So,
I think that's a good
and
idea.
as
That'd
much,
work for
and as
me.
much fun as that roller coaster merry-go-round is, it's getting a little tiring, so that
Yeah,
might
and I
be,
think that's
That would,
right.
that's, I think
Um,
that's a good suggestion.
Okay, I will take it on my to-do list to make that happen, to start, to schedule a
Right,
meeting
good.
on that.
I know I'm opposed, and I would think general government would probably majority agree with me not being, in line with, earn tune to accept 6.
oh.
Yeah,
It's too high or too low?
Number 6.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, number
six.
6.
Right, yeah.
Not the percentage 6. The
Okay, all right.
Paragraph 6, point
Legally,
6.
neither one of us can,
Right,
we really can't say that because it's
illegal.
it's
Yeah.
illegal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's-
pollution.
Okay.
okay, so I think we will have a meeting with a representative from each board and with you and with
Right.
Tony. Is Tony back in the office next week?
Yes.
Tuesday, okay.
But, yeah,
Probably.
don't call him
Pro-
Tuesday.
Probably not before Wednesday or Thursday.
He'll be here Tuesday.
Okay.
And that'll give next week for the finance committee and the selectmen and the school committee to choose the victim, representative.
It's a pleasure to be on the merry-go-round with you, Doctor.
There you go.
Yeah.
Teresa?
What's
As long as
the
I get the horse.
what's the expectation on the timeline then?
That was,
I like that.
yeah. So,
Excuse me.
I wanted to talk about, you're right, expectations on timeline for MOU and for the financial policies. I think Anne makes a really good point that the MOU will be much easier to write if we can just be pointing to financial policies that detail some of that. So, what would people recommend for a timeline for when we're hoping to get that work done?
I think the financial policies are fairly close to being in good shape. There are some comments that need to be made, some wordsmithing to go on. We need to meet as a group, obviously, to make sure that
Meaning the
everybody's-
school committee,
school
the
committee.
finance
Right.
commission, and
Yeah.
the board of selectmen?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I'd love to, I'm assuming that Tony is the owner of the most recent version. And I spent quite a bit of time looking for a copy of it, and I wasn't successful. So when Tony gets back, we
What
should have
version, what are you talking about?
the most recent version of the policies.
The financial policies that we started editing back at our joint meeting of all three
Wanna make a
committees
Is that last week?
11
Well-
months ago.
11 months ago, okay.
Yeah, I mean, not much has happened in the last 5,
No.
6 or 7 months anyway. And most of the policies in there are
None of
really,
them are dated, Bill.
the same things we've been doing for
I'll
years.
I'll find something.
So,
In-
are we, I guess, to my mind, time is sort of divvied up for what has to happen. First, what has to happen by next week, and next Thursday we're meeting with you, and so we have to finish our budget
Right.
before we meet with you. But then the next thing is what has to happen before the April 1 election, then what has to happen before April 25 town meeting. It is 25, right?
That's special.
Special,
It's
right, is
special.
when it starts.
So
And
the annual-
this would be the, and so
the
then
annual is May 9,
May 13th.
13th.
Right. So what, are we hoping to have an MOU and financial policies just in time for, May 13th? I thought that, like FinCom wanted us to agree to an MOU before they took a position on the override.
The FinCom clearly wants, an acceptable MOU before we would take a final position on an override. There's no
So,
question.
so when does that mean that when would you like to, what would we propose as our deadline?
Well, I mean, outside date clearly is town meeting. I mean,
Right.
we understand that.
When's our next meeting?
I would, it would be nice if we could have one prior to the town election on April 1. I don't know whether that's possible or not.
An MOU and policies?
At least an MOU.
The MOU should be,
But I think we're close enough in the policies that there really shouldn't be
Okay.
that much of a difference, really. I don't think it will have much of an impact.
Make a copy of those?
wait,
Um,
no, I have lots of copies of lots of
I mean,
different.
the school committee currently has only one meeting scheduled in March for next Wednesday, and that will be busy trying to
Right.
do budgets, and then we will be meeting with
Right.
you the following night.
Correct.
And we've talked about, for policies, we need to pull together all three boards.
Right, right.
So we had talked about possibly a Saturday, right?
But to meet with the three
All three
boards?
boards?
Yeah, yeah.
So should we kind of send out a poll to see if we can do a Saturday in March or early April?
Works for me.
Okay.
So who's actually executing the MOU? Is that the budget balancing committee?
It's been mostly
Select
Tony and
committee?
David, that's most.
No, I understand.
No, the
The-
selection and
The
the-
budget
Yes.
balancing committee is charged, Tony and I, with developing
But-
that.
Right, but I think in
It
the end,
comes-
it will be sort of ratified, I guess, by school committee and board of selectmen.
Same way the financial policies were
Right.
originally. We did that. This group put it together and sent it
Yeah.
to all the groups to sign it. And that way, all the boards are
So each
on
board
board
would-
and can
would
promise the
vote and Their
public.
chair would sign.
This is our intent.
Mm-hmm.
And, yeah, I think it would be, approved by, because school committee's being asked to make specific promises, general government's being asked to make specific promises, so school committee and board of selectmen have to directly sign.
Right.
But then, FinCom obviously has a role in this, so we want input,
Right.
so that
So why don't you, that joint meeting of the three boards, why don't you do the
both, yes,
financial policies, when that's done, then move on to the MOU and get that done, and then you're done.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're pretty close on both of them.
I wanna make it April 6th, Saturday, April 6th.
I have to look at my calendar, I don't know what's going. Oh, it's Micah that weekend.
That's,
That's
yeah.
what my
Is it really?
commitment, yeah.
Oh, you and who are busy.
Yeah.
I promised I'd stand at the,
Maybe the same thing, do a poll.
yeah, we can send out
Yeah.
a poll and see
Yeah.
what
No,
availability looks like.
I think Tom has a really good suggestion. Let's get all the, let's get all the talking heads together and, hash this out.
Right, okay.
Thank you,
And-
everybody.
Anything further?
I'd like to see movement.
Yes. Anything further on the MOU? Thank you for your efforts, everyone. Any other business? All right, then I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. We're waiting for a year to be able to say that.
Oh, right, do we want to, so now, I guess the question is, do we need another meeting of the Budget Balancing Committee? If we are going to do a group meeting of the three boards to do the
MOUs and
the
policy.
policies and the MOU, and, I mean, I guess,
You're still $100,000 short, right?
I,
231.
Well, if they use the 160, they're only about 40 short.
Okay.
I think certainly if the state comes back with bad news when the House
Yeah,
comes
then-
out,
then we need to
then
call
we
it.
would
Right.
definitely need to call another meeting,
Right.
but,
Yeah.
I mean,
So
there's no more pots of money to
We
find,
may, unfortunately,
unfortunately.
may not know about the stuff.
I'm sure you'll do this, but if the school committee votes to balance their budget, whatever changes you make, just Anne Marie will
Yeah.
populate it, and just let me know when that's done, and then I can start the formal, budget preparation for the FinCom.
we expect to make additional votes a week from tonight.
Mhm.
All right. So I think there's no need to necessarily schedule another BBC meeting until we figure out when the three committees can come together, and obviously unless we hear something bad.
What else, what other data bits? You mentioned the state, the GIC, snow and ice final numbers.
Right.
It's
I don't know if
nothing more.
the Forbes property factor in at all when we get those bids.
Could.
Not in time for this though, right?
Well, April 8th,
Yeah,
we'll
there'd be
open
the-
them,
there'd
then
be
we
the
have to
bids.
evaluate them and go from there, but we'll have some sense of what's happening after we open them on April 8th.
Mm.
And our GIC, because open enrollment ends basically May 1st or 2nd, whatever the date is, so we have to scramble to try to make sure there aren't any changes to the budget.
Right.
So, but that's always been the case.
Right.
I make a statement for those who are watching. I've heard some comments around town, or actually they've come back to me, I haven't personally heard them, that people are questioning why we're having trouble with schools can't balance their budget, why we're calling for an override, when the general manager is on the town's dime out in Singapore. The town manager is not on the town's dime, it's not costing the town a dime. He's taking personal vacation time, and his cost is being incurred by an agency that's invited him to participate in the program and/or his own personal cash. So there is no relationship whatsoever to town budget problems or override questions, because the town manager is out of town.
Right.
Thank you.
All right. Alan had made a motion to adjourn. Who would
Second.
like to
Yeah.
second? All right, Tom. All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.